in this greatest of all time conversation, I'm ready to make the assertion in the NFL. Perhaps there would be some holdouts who still think it's Joe Montana, but I do think it is Tom Brady. The record is just undeniable. Um,
I agree. I think in the NFL, as a quarterback, I think it's Tom Brady. You have to give it to Tom Brady.
but then the challenge beyond that is to say the greatest athlete. And I don't really
Yeah.
know that you can stack up athletes from other leagues, but I think it brings up an interesting conversation. Some people say Serena Williams is the greatest athlete ever. Some people say Tom Brady is the greatest athlete ever. Some people say Babe Ruth, Muhammad Ali. I mean,
Yeah. It's hard to do it cross sports because each sport requires such a different level of skill. And so, like, while maybe Serena Williams is the greatest athlete, could she go and play football like with Tom Brady? No, you know what I mean?
yeah,
And Tom Brady couldn't go and compete for a grand slam. So I think that there's a lot of, it's hard to say, but if I was going to just say it anyways, I like Serena Williams, but I'm
yeah.
biased.
Well, Serena's vaulted to the top of her sport, but then again, it is so hard to make that comparison because you're right. She couldn't throw 3 touchdowns at a Super Bowl. It's just a different skill set. And then Michael Jordan couldn't
Right.
do, what he was able to do in basketball, which sort of opens up the Jordan LeBron conversation again, which, I still wouldn't hand to LeBron just yet.
I wouldn't
But
either.
I still think he has more work ahead of him.
Yeah.
But
I
just
think that's
as far as a transcendental athlete, if that's a word, an athlete that just transcends their sport, you can't deny Tom Brady. You just can't. And that's
as
just how,
much as I'd like to,
as much
but
as I'd like to, but then again, I'm not going to go out and say that he beats out Serena Williams the way some people would assert, because I just don't think you can do that.
it's hard to say. I mean, and we had talked about earlier actually Michael Phelps, and I thought that was an interesting name
Best
because
best swimmer ever.
best swimmer out there, but he couldn't play football, you know? So I don't know, but I like, in terms of pure athleticism,
Right.
I like Michael Phelps, Serena Williams, Tom Brady over like a Tiger Woods type of character
Right.
because this is a personal opinion and I don't mean to offend golf players, but I think that golf is more about skill than it is about athleticism. So if I'm looking at it purely from
Okay, I see.
like pure work and grind, I feel like I would say maybe a more difficult sport than a technique sport.
Right. I could see that. What Brady has going for him is that he plays the single most important position in team sports, no questions asked.
Yeah.
Like there's no sport that has a position comparable to the quarterback. So if you look at Babe Ruth and what he was able to do, maybe the greatest to ever play the game of baseball, his role just isn't as inherently instrumental as a quarterback is. But certainly, to me, it's in baseball, it's Ruth. If you were to go around in soccer, it's Pele.
Yes.
Um,
Michael Jordan
Michael Jordan
basketball.
basketball, but pure athleticism is almost a different conversation. Some people say Bo Jackson is the most athletic, purely, right? And so you can just go all around here.
Yeah. I mean, and you can't forget like Muhammad Ali and
Muhammad
boxing.
Ali.
Like, if you're thinking athleticism, that is like, what is a more like display of that than boxing? But I also don't know tons of like odd sports, snowboarders, skiers. Like, I think
Right.
that those things are really interesting and those are really great athletes that we kind of overlook a lot. And so I don't know. I think that it's hard to judge entirely like who is the greatest of every sport over just their own individual sport.
Yeah, and I'm googling here best Olympian ever because I'm curious the as far as the best American Olympians,
Yeah.
it is Phelps at the top, right? If
Yeah, and in terms of like medals won, then
Right.
definitely I think it's Michael Phelps.
right.
But I don't know, can you judge anything? I guess in the Olympics it's fair to do a medals won because you're not really relying on like a team, whereas I feel like it's not fair to do like Super Bowls won to determine the greatest necessarily because I feel like that is determined on so many different factors,
Right.
whereas like Olympians are usually just determined on themselves.
Yes, individual in that sense. And some of these past guys that were and women that we're talking about, it's hard to make the judgment because we didn't watch them play. So
Right.
if they're in the past, of course we know them, we've learned about them. Perhaps we've seen a documentary about them, but we watched Tom Brady play.
Right.
And I watched him on the Patriots for 20 years, right? Something like that. And he was just the smartest guy at the position. He just never had the biggest arm. Not 1 year in his career was he the guy the way that Mahomes is now with the
Right.
Chiefs. He was never that guy. He was always the guy who could just, you gave him the ball with 1 minute and 30 seconds and one timeout, and you're down by 6. He's going to get into the end zone and win that game. Or down by 2, he's going to get you down the field. You're going to kick a field goal and you're going to win.
Yeah.
This guy had the ball in his hand. You left the ball in his hand at the end of the game. He was going to make it happen always.
Yeah. I read something about him and it was just like, Tom Brady is the most prepared quarterback I've ever worked with. He does his homework. He does his readings. And so I think that is why he can see the field so well and he can make these great plays and make these big moves because he has such a full and total understanding of the game and what is needed of him in the midst of a moment. And so I think that perhaps he maybe doesn't have the greatest arm, but he has the greatest knowledge and understanding of where he needs to be going and who he needs to be looking for in a moment.
And notably, he never really lit it up in a Super Bowl. This was
his easiest Super Bowl win.
Easiest.
Yeah.
None of them came easy, and they usually don't for Tom. But in this case, they did. It did. And he's just a guy who is clearly a leader, and you can't deny it. When you're able to do it in New England for so long, and you knew that Bill Belichick was clearly a great leader, although he certainly doesn't have the externally facing qualities of a leader because he just seems like a dirtbag. But, he's able to get a locker room focused on one goal. And Tom Brady clearly can do that because he went to Tampa Bay and was able to get that locker room focused.
No, yeah. And I mean, like, look at Gronk, who scored, I think maybe 2 touchdowns, and Antonio Brown. Like, those people would not have been on that team if it had not been for Tom Brady. And so
right.
I'm not saying that the whole team's success is because of him, but it is with him. He made such a difference in that offense and in that organization as a whole. I mean, I think that his locker room presence probably cannot be understated. I think to have such a veteran player, such a successful player around you, it brings you up. It brings people up to their level. It challenges them to be better. And so I think that is more so what he has going for him is his reputation. His reputation precedes him, and people want to work with him and they want to perform well with him.
There's nobody like him in that sense. He makes everybody around him better. The only guy who can somehow occasionally he'll have a game where he throws 3 interceptions. And you're like, does he even have it? Sometimes he just doesn't have it, but still they find a way to be there at the end, whoever he's with. Now it's 2 teams. And in that sense, there's just nobody like him that I can think of in sports.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of anyone either. It's hard for me to say. Like you said, I never saw Babe Ruth play. So I don't know, I guess necessarily like maybe that there are some greater players out there that I just have never watched. And so I don't have anyone to compare him to. But that's the thing. I think that Tom Brady is uncomparable. I don't know anyone to compare him to.
No, he's the incomparable. And at the same time, for all of these things that I'll say about him, and I won't hesitate to call him the greatest in the game of football, is that I just can't stand him. I
hate to watch him win.
I hate to watch him win. I had a little bit of fun watching him celebrate. I didn't mind that. I was good to see him smile. I can't like, to see somebody happy. It's hard to be upset about that. That would be a little sadistic, but his success does not bring me joy.
Yeah.
To me, he'll always be a Patriot. I'm a Jet fan, so I'll always have him as a Patriot in my head. And the guy just won year in and year out. So, was just the worst of them all. And I occasionally dominated the Jets, although perhaps one of the highlights of my life was when we did beat him in the playoffs. And I hold on to that moment closely because that was it. I'm sure you hold on to your Philadelphia moment beating him.
Super Bowl win when we beat Tom Brady. Yes,
it feels good to beat Brady. It does.
I hold that very closely. Yes.
At the same time, people who tell me that they're happy for him or that they were rooting for him, I can't.
I can never root for him. I'm like you said, when I saw him at the parade, I was happy for his success. I happy that he had a great time, but do I want him to have a great time? Do I want him to go to parades, boat parades? No,
Right.
I don't. Like, I would prefer that he didn't, but I have no control over that.
Hopefully some kind of new wave of quarterbacks emerges, that because Brady is of course on the tail end, although who even never knows, but he's on the tail end, I hope,